So you're wondering what's keeping you from being happy in the moment? Well, we're going to cover that and much more in this week's book review, so stay tuned. Hey guys, it's Adam over at Teach You Freedom, and on this week's book review, we're going to be talking about The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This book is jam-packed with information. It was really one of my, first insights into spirituality, mindfulness, the conscious mind, the ego. It really is an introduction for a lot of people just because of the way the book's written. So I think you guys are really going to find a bunch of useful information in this. As usual, what we're going to do is break down the biggest ideas that I got from the book, and I'm going to share those with you here. So let's go ahead and get into the first one. The first big idea is surrender to what is, right? And Eckhart Tolle has this excerpt in the book that says, take whatever's happened to you as if you had chosen it, right? And what he's really trying to get at is, you can't change what's happened, right? You can't change what is. You can't change the reality of, what's already unfolded. And so much of us spend our lives, or even, significant portions of our lives, trying to change what is, right? Trying to fight against the reality of what's happened, right? Spending time wishing things were different, trying to, beating yourself up over, not going back and changing how you approach something, wishing, you could go back and change losing a job, a breakup, somebody getting sick, the passing of a loved one, right? We spend so much stress, anxiety, fear, anger, resentment, holding on to those things because we're trying to fight what is. A more empowered state that Eckhart talks about in the book is surrendering to what is as if you had chosen it, and then being able to then calculate a better course forward. And what that does is it gives you your power back because you're no longer a victim to the circumstance. You can then radically surrender to what is and then better appropriate your response for the future. It's a really good way of being locked into the now and accepting what is, and then being able to make a better course forward instead of living in the past or present, ruminating and being resentful, trying to fight what already is that happened. Because the reality is that you can't change that. What you can change is how you're looking at it, and then make a better choice about how you're going to move forward. Really, really cool idea. I really, really enjoyed that one. Next one that I want to talk to you guys about is Eckhart's concept of watching the thinker. Okay, this is where the book starts to turn a little bit into a mindfulness kind of conscientious book, tapping into a little bit of spirituality. But Eckhart makes the point that so many of us kind of just assume that because we can think and as humans we're able to think thoughts, that's what our mind is, right? And that's what our essence is. And the reality is that that's not really our essence. So many of us are consumed by our thought thinking that we think that that's who we are. But reality, who we are, is the person watching those thoughts, right? So have you ever been able to get some distance, whether via meditating or even just sitting here looking at your thoughts, and you're almost like a fly on the wall watching thing these crazy thoughts, zing by? Eckhart describes that as being the watcher watching the thinker, right? You are not actually your thoughts, right? Who you actually are is this person observing your thoughts, and that's the essence of who you truly are. So many of us kind of get caught up in the identification of our thoughts, right? We think we are all these crazy thoughts of anxiety, panic, just things coming up in our minds. We get so attached to those thoughts when the reality of the situation is we're not our thoughts. Our minds are great tools, but they aren't exactly who we are. And so an important concept to understand is that, you are the watcher watching those thoughts. You are not the thoughts themselves. And the problem that Eckhart points out about this is that when we become so attached to thinking and our thoughts, that's actually the ego kind of creating a false self, identifying with external things or thoughts that we have. And if we really want to become conscious of those things, we need to start realizing that we aren't those thoughts, we aren't those external things, we aren't those events. Those are the false self we've created. But reality is that we are, what's more true to our essence is that we are the watcher watching the thinker of those thoughts, right? And that dichotomy and separating those two out is really important to living more presently and living more in touch with who you really are, which I thought was a really, really cool point. So big idea number 3 that I want to share with you guys is clock time versus psychological time, okay? And something as I'm reading this book, I'm sure you guys probably have a little bit of idea of, what I'm like and, how I think, but I had a little bit of trouble with this book in the beginning because it's so focused on the now, right? Just live so presently in the now, nothing else matters. And I started thinking to myself, well, how do you set goals, right? How do you achieve things if you're just so focused on the now? It almost seems like hedonistic, where you're just craving the next hit of something, right? Eckhart actually really poignantly addresses this. He says there's a difference between clock time and psychological time, right? So clock time is, when he explains it, it's objective time, right? It's next week I'm going to write this paper on fish, right? Or whatever it might be. Or tomorrow I'm going to clean my room, right? So clock time is objective, it's measurable, and it's, you know, usually well received that, you know, you can kind of look towards something and there's nothing attached to it. It's completely objective, right? So that's clock time, a future facing, action or event taking place. Psychological time is all the emotional baggage that comes from, you know, some type of future or past facing event. So if clock time is I'm going to write a paper next week, what we want to avoid is the psychological time of the anxiety, stress, and thoughts that come with, you know, whatever it is that we want to do in the future, writing that paper next week. So if the clock time is I want to write a paper next week, the psychological time is, you know, I'm stressed about the paper that I have next week and that's all you can think about, or I'm anxious about how I'm going to approach that, or, you know, I'm upset because last time in the past when I went to go write a paper, you know, I did terribly, I got bad feedback from my boss, and you know, now I'm afraid of taking on new tasks or new papers that I'm going to write. Clock time is good because it helps us set direction and path to live more presently in the now. Psychological time actually pulls us out of the present and takes us into the future or the past, which is where we don't want to go, right? We don't want to ruminate on the past or the present, something that we can't do anything about. Clock time is really set as a way to, you know, set future-facing goals, but psychological time is something we want to avoid because what it's doing is making us ruminate on, you know, things that we can't change, being the past and the present, and taking away from the focus of the now, which is really, really cool distinction. And I'm glad that Eckhart pointed it out because it gave me some reassurance that this is a really, really useful tool, you know, focusing on the power of now without taking away from some of the things that I find so important, which is goal setting, being ambitious, taking on, you know, tasks and responsibilities. So glad he knocked that out of the park. Now, number 4, the last topic I want to talk to you guys about isn't something that was like a really, really big point hit home by the book, but something that I found really, really interesting, and that's the topic of relationships, okay? And Eckhart uses the topic of relationships to kind of segue into a bunch of different avenues, but really he talks about is why are we so consumed with, you know, fulfilling ourselves through others, right? Why are relationships kind of so intoxicating to a certain point? And what he says is that so often we are unhappy by ourselves, or so often we're looking to fill voids within ourselves that we become addicted in seeking out other people to fulfill ourselves, right? And I thought, wow, that is such an important message, because how many of us can relate to, you know, wanting to just be alone with somebody else so we're not really alone, right? Or fulfilling our needs through other people, either in relationships, sexual encounters, even, you know, friendships, right? Even though we don't really care about that person, we're using them to fulfill some part of us. And I thought, you know what, that is so insightful. It not only applies to relationships, but so many other things in our lives that we're trying to fulfill, right? Drugs, addictions, hobbies to a certain extent, right? Certain activities that we're doing. And at the underpinning of all of this is that we are looking for ways to escape from ourselves or fill this void and avoid the present, right? And that's really the point that he drives home here that I really, really love. Why are we spending so much time searching for things outside of ourselves to give us fulfillment when all that is temporary, right? It's an ongoing cyclical nature of, you know, looking outside ourselves for something. When X happens, then I will be okay, right? When I achieve Y, then I will be happy, right? And the reality is that so much of our longingness to be whole doesn't come from outside of ourselves, but comes from inside of ourselves, right? And the first step in that is acknowledging the fact that we have some insufficiencies and that we're running from something, and then becoming aware of that, and then working on asking, why am I so hard trying to escape from the present? And that's really the point that he drives home, is why are we running from the present? Why are we running from ourselves through external things, and then going ahead and addressing that head on? Those are the 4 big takeaways that I got from this book that I want to share with you guys. 1, surrender to what is. 2, watching the thinker. 3, clock time versus psychological time. And then 4, the concept of searching outside of ourselves in relationships, and so many other things. So I hope you guys enjoyed this book review. There's going to be tons more to come. If you like this book review and you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe to my channel down below. I've also included the footnotes and a bunch of other resources for you guys down in the description. So until next time, I hope to see you guys soon.